Hey everyone, and welcome into another edition of Betting Weekly Fast Break. I'm Sara Civian, and I'm joined by professional handicapper Wes Reynolds on the first Friday of October. Folks, last Tuesday seems like 45 years ago when the banged up Fever managed to take the Aces to overtime in the semifinals, so hats off to them. But we finally got game one of the WNBA Finals upon us tonight, a meeting between the number 2 seeded Aces and the number 4 seeded Mercury. Of course, we'll get into all of that and more, but first, if I look tired, it's because I took Caitlin Clark's advice last night and stayed up till 4 a.m. listening to Taylor Swift's new album, Life of a Showgirl. Wes, did you listen?
I have not. I have heard some clips on all the different morning shows, and I'm sure a lot of sales for this album. And what are some of the subliminal messages about Travis Kelce's ex, or about Blake Lively, or reading into it? It's always fun, I guess, to read into that. But this album should be yet another hit for T Swizzle here.
Yeah, 100%. It worked out for me tonight, where we're going to see the movie at 10:30, and the game one is on at 8. So some of my friends that don't typically watch basketball, I'm kind of convincing them to go get dinner and watch the game. So that'll be fun. They're listening to this episode so we can inform them and inform the rest of the people about where our heads are at when it comes to betting today. Are you ready?
I'm ready. It looks like we've got a good finals. It's not the finals I wanted. I think it's probably the better matchup. I wanted the Fever to run this as long as they possibly could, and they were so down in overtime. Just having not only the players that were out, but then Kelsey Mitchell, of course, gets hurt. Aaliyah Boston fouls out. So they're running it with like the back end of their roster, and they're just hanging in there, and then just ran out of time and ran out of gas, I think, there at the end. So we probably do have the better matchup, even though it felt like the Lynx should be here, but they are not here. They've, of course, been in the news this week. So I think we at least have a competitive finals based on, of course, the series price. This is almost a coin flip between the Merc and the Aces.
Yeah, and we'll see the odds that are extremely reflected in that statement in a second here. But definitely to your point about the Aces, I mean, you got handed to Stephanie White. People were a little skeptical at the beginning of the season. The way she coached, her paw prints were all over that team. You got handed to other like journey women players like Odyssey Sims as well. They started out not on a roster, right? And then it's just kind of they play their hearts out. And Kelsey Mitchell, it stunk, and it was scary to see the Rab go. That she did tweet that, you know what, you can't say I didn't give it my all, and that's so true.
Yeah, and I was concerned. It looks like things are going to be okay. It wasn't, I was like, I'm hoping this is a basketball injury. I'm hoping this is a knee or an ankle, but just severe cramping, and in terms of in terms of the blood work and whatnot. It looks like she's going to be okay long term, so that's a good thing. But when I saw that stretcher come out, there was obviously major cause for concern that this was worse than what a typical cramp would be in a basketball game. But fortunately, things are okay. But the Fever, give it to Stephanie White, like you said, and the culture of this team. So I made a comment, though. I go, that Lynx and Fever final next year are going to hit because, they seem like the two redemption teams, but they're going to be in Cancun or wherever the hell they are right now, watching the Merc and the Aces.
And, oh, God, that Lynx and Fever eventual matchup is faded in the stars. Everyone's getting suspended. Everyone's yelling on the bench, and it'll be glorious for us fans. So you are right, though, that this is probably the best basketball terms matchup we're going to get. The Aces were the hottest team coming into the playoffs, and they're, of course, getting elite performances from MVP A'ja Wilson, but they've struggled to close out both of their playoff series so far. They were nearly upset by number 7 seed Seattle in the first round, pulling out a Game 3 victory by 1 point. Then it took overtime in Game 5, as we just discussed, of the semifinal for them to get past Indiana, despite all of the injuries and foul trouble they were having. So through 2 rounds, these Aces have the playoff field's best shooting percentage and its second best 3-point clip. They also lead in postseason blocks and steals per game. So I'm going to ask you first, what's one thing you've learned about the Aces that makes you think they're going to win the championship, and one thing that makes you think they're cooked?
Well, the fact that they're resilient and the fact that they did turn the season around when it looked like they were the Wash Vegas Aces in midseason. They made that switch with Jewel Lloyd coming off the bench, and then all of a sudden, maybe some water found its level, because this team does have a couple on the roster that are getting a little bit older, to be fair. But Aja Wilson has been Wonder Woman and has absolutely carried this team at times. Jackie Young certainly has done her part as well. So, that the resiliency of the Aces, the fact that, they didn't pack it in when things were going wrong in midseason, makes me think that they can win. And what makes me think that they can't win is their depth. I don't think that they're very deep at all. Like, they don't get, other than now Jewel Lloyd, they don't get necessarily massive contributions off the bench on a nightly basis. And that's what concerns me a little bit for the Aces, because I think Phoenix does. They get consistent bench contributions, and the Aces really don't. They are so reliant on Aja Wilson. And if she is not going, it is very rare that they're able to win. Like, game 3 was kind of an anomaly because she had a terrible game in game 3 by her standards against the Fever, but everybody else just happened to step up that night. Nalissa Smith and of course Jackie Young and Chelsea Gray, like, they were able to step up that night. And then in game 4, where Aja Wilson had a monster game, they ended up losing because the Fever got to the foul line, and there was a discrepancy because the Aces were behind and fouling at the end, and that's what made the discrepancy more. But yeah, can Aja Wilson do it over a 7-game series? She's been able to do it in a 3-game series against Seattle. She was able to mostly do it in a 5-game series against the Fever. But now you're going 7 games, and the depth advantage certainly is with Phoenix over the course of a longer series.
Yeah, so we'll talk about the Mercury side too. They appear to be peaking in the playoffs after some injury trouble late in the regular season. And I know the series with the Lynx ended controversially. We could spend all day debating the merits of that, but we are here to focus on winning bets, people. So Phoenix is averaging the fewest turnovers per game in the playoffs. They're a defensively sound team. What's one thing you've learned about the Mercury that make you think they're going to win? And then one cause for concern.
I guess I'll start with a little bit of the cause for concern. They do get some erratic performances from their stars. I think Alyssa Thomas, even when the scoring is down, is pretty consistent rebounding and with the assists and playing the offense through her on those dribble handoffs and letting her kind of really create the offense, even though she's not really a point guard necessarily, but she does just that. I guess the cause for concern is you need consistency out of some of their other stars, particularly Sabali. Sabali has had some of these games where she can't hit the broadside of a barn, and then all of a sudden, when she's going inside and outside and hitting threes and getting to the baskets and getting the line, she looks like one of the better players in the league. And I think she's one of the more talented players in the league, just a little bit inconsistent. And then what makes me think that they can is their depth. And I think some of their 3-point shooting, when you bring like a Whitcomb off the bench or Dewana Bonner off the bench, they can give you contributions. I think from outside, especially shooting threes. So can the Aces really get into a shootout with this team? You would think that they can on the surface, but I think that probably will favor the Mercury a little bit, despite the fact that the Merc don't really have that traditional point guard, you would say. Like they don't have a Caitlin Clark that's a traditional point guard, or even a Chelsea Gray, even though she's a little bit older now, that are your traditional point guards. So it's basically AT is like a point forward that essentially runs the offense.
Yeah, and here the series odds have opened up at Bet Rivers, and it's pretty, as you'd expect, priced, with the Aces being the favorites at -130, the Mercury plus 108. What are your thoughts here? Do you think that's something worth betting on for the WNBA championship, or hold off? What are you thinking?
I do. I actually think that the wrong team is favored here for a couple of the different reasons that I mentioned. And I know Phoenix isn't going to get much credit because of their path from the playoffs to the WNBA Finals. they played the Liberty with Stewie basically on one leg for
Mhm.
the back half of that series. And then they get Nafisa Collier hurt before game 4. And, she was riding out there on the scooter because of what happened at the end of that game, that collision with AT where the steel was clean, but there was a bump that wasn't called. And that's where Cheryl Reeve, of course, went ballistic on the officiating, and rightfully so. And also in the press conferences, a lot of those Lynx press conferences have been very newsworthy lately. Not just Cheryl Reeve, but Nafisa Collier. So there won't be that awkwardness with the Lynx not in the finals of Kathy Engelbert having to present the trophy to Nafisa Collier and Cheryl Reeve. So at least they eliminated that from that standpoint. But I do think Phoenix has more depth, and I think that they get to the line largely because of Alyssa Thomas. I don't mean it to be derisive when I say this, but she's sensitive about it, but she does play bully ball. And she is very physical and is able to get to the line. And then what I worry about on the Aces side, can Aja Wilson survive this like really physical series? Because remember, she was not happy about the officiating in game 4 with Aaliyah Boston getting so frequently to the line. I felt maybe that was a little bit of a, makeup calls for maybe the previous couple games before that, where it felt like the Fever maybe didn't get the best end of the whistle. But I said it before the Fever series. I thought that Fever series price was too high, even though I wouldn't expect to cash that ticket over a 5-game series, and they certainly didn't. But the Aces were priced too high. I think Phoenix should actually it should be reversed. I think they should be the small favorite in this series, just because they're a little bit more well rested. They did not have to go 5 games. And that game 5 was tough. It ended up being, where the Aces ended up covering at the end because the Fever gave one more foul instead of letting it go with just a few seconds left, and that got the Aces ahead of the number. Fever really should have covered that game, so that was bad beat city if you did bet the Fever. But the Aces, look, they had to dig deep in game 5 against a team that was, the walking wounded essentially. So that's maybe a sign that I don't think that the Aces should be the favorite in this series. I think Phoenix absolutely should be.
Yeah, that makes me feel good because me and Doug, I mean, months ago went in on I think it was plus 700 for Mercury to be the champs. I was not, as the Lynx kind of grew and grew throughout the season, I wasn't expecting that to cash. But now I'm like, hey, I might get some value there. But yeah, I mean, I am with you on that. And I think with the Aces, these games have been too close for comfort. Like you mentioned, the lack of depth off the bench has been a huge issue. And it's kind of when a series goes to 7, that's something that has to really factor in.
Yeah, no question about it. Some of these role players for the Aces, they're going to be called on at some point to step up. Whether it's Megan Gustafson or God, her name is escaping me right now. Unfortunately, Aaliyah Nye or somebody like that. But I don't think that Becky Hammond. I think the starters are going to play, even a more heavy load in this series because I don't know how much Becky Hammond really trusts that bench. Kirsten Bell and some of these players. Cheyenne Parker Tyus, of course, just came back from childbirth a few weeks ago. Kia Stokes. You're not seeing the only bench contributions I think that they can maybe count on is in the backcourt with Jewel Lloyd and Dana Evans. The depth of this team is just severely lacking, and the starters really have to carry the load. Meanwhile, I think for Phoenix, you have West Bell that can contribute. You have Sammy Whitcomb that can contribute. You have Akoa Makani, who's kind of half the time a starter, half time not, contribute. So I do trust Nate Tibbetts in the Mercury a little bit more from that standpoint.
Yeah, and speaking of carrying the load, we got the finals MVP odds as well that we'll get into before we just dive right into game 1. So Wilson's favorited at minus 121. AT is right next up at plus 150, and then it kind of drops off from there as expected. Any opinion on this one?
Nothing that I think I'm going to bet here, but
Ooh.
Alyssa Thomas probably makes sense if you think that the Mercury are going to win this series. She has, of course, been an MVP candidate over the last couple of years, didn't get it. Aja Wilson, of course, did. So, this could be, okay, let's reward her. Even if the numbers aren't what they typically are, where sometimes these things can be like maybe lifetime or career achievement awards in a
Yes.
way. So
Mhm.
Alyssa Thomas certainly makes sense. I think probably the one player for the Merc that puts up the bigger numbers is Sabali, but I think that they would go with Thomas because she's essentially, you know, been the bedrock of the team and is the one that handles the ball most and the one that stuffs the stat sheets from a rebounds and assist standpoint, maybe more than a scoring standpoint. That I think is going to fall more on Sabali and Kalia Copper, of course. But you know, I think whoever you like in the series, that's probably correlated with the MVP. That's why you're not getting, I think, that much of a bargain necessarily in the price with the aces
Mhm.
being, of course, Aja Wilson's going to be odds on. Like, who else is going to do that unless Jackie Young just puts up a couple 30-point games in a row in this series? So it has to be Aja for the aces, and then for the Mercury, Alyssa Thomas. So you know, maybe there's something to that if you want to play MVP. I know that there's some wiggle room there, but if you like the Mercury in this series, Alyssa Thomas might not be a bad pivot at plus 150 for MVP, but no bet for me at this time.
Yeah, yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm not going to place it, but I think it's too obvious. Like the top two are correct, and it's just kind of like it. We'll see who wins the
Hmm.
championship. But yeah, I'm with you on that. We got a question in the chat, and I kind of forget the whole thing, but they were kind of asking what has a team in professional women's basketball gone through the gauntlet that the Mercury had gone through. I think they had some tough opponents and they eked it out there. I think that is a good point where they kind of were able to overcome. I mean, the Lynx and they had a pretty tough run there, so that kind of makes me feel like they can handle the Aces. What do you think?
They caught some breaks with the injuries. Look,
Yeah.
I felt that they were the better team than the Liberty.
Mhm,
I really
mhm,
did. And the Liberty just never, part of it was injuries and Sabrina missing time and Stewie missing a lot of time. Uh, they never were really kind of on like the same level at the same time. And there's a reason why they made a change in New York and Sandy Brindello is now out as coach, because I think a lot of people were surprised by that. But the Liberty just they didn't look the same
yeah,
as of course they did last
yeah,
year. Now with the Lynx, I felt that the Lynx were the best team all year. They were who I picked at the beginning of the year to win the WNBA championship, and just that injury to Collier, I think was kind of the death blow essentially for them. Even though they did have a big lead in Game 4 going into the fourth quarter, and they just ran out of steam. They were up, I
mhm,
think, 13 last Sunday at the end of the third quarter, and then there was I think with only a couple minutes left of the game, they had like 3 points in the quarter, and there was a doubt whether they were even going to cover the game, let alone win. But fortunately for those of us that had 5.5, the Lynx hung in there. But I do think that the Merc have gotten some luck with
yeah,
injuries, because I think that probably would have went 5 games.
yeah.
Had at least would have went 5. Now maybe Phoenix could have won on the road again like they did in game number 2, but they probably got a little bit of fortune. So maybe that's why they're being slightly discounted. I don't want to say they're
Mhm.
being given no chance, because they're like plus 110 or
Yeah,
something to win. I mean,
yeah.
it's basically a coin flip. It's basically like a 50.1 to 49.9 proposition
Mhm,
out of 100% here. So I don't want to say they're being discounted, but
mhm.
I think the Aces, because of the hot streak and because the Mercury might have gotten some injury breaks with who they faced in the playoff road, that's why they're a very small dog here.
And just the Wilson factor. I mean, she is the league
Yeah,
MVP, and
there
she has
there
been
that
putting
is
up
accounted for. You're
monster.
absolutely right.
Yeah.
That is accounted for in that, where it's like, okay, when in doubt, which team has the best player? And in that case, it's the Las
Mhm.
Vegas Aces, and Aja Wilson proved that she was the best player, winning the MVP yet again. But I think the balance, I'd lean to the Mercury in the series.
I gotta say, I am like, I just thought about it, and I'm so pumped up to see Alyssa Thomas and Asia Wilson go at it tonight. Like, I just feel like obviously they have different strengths and they're so good at what they do respectively. Like you said, there's not a traditional point guard on the Mercury, and it just the way they play differently and so elite right now, and the
Hmm.
way AT has showed up in these playoffs kind of with the bully ball. I love it. Like that's not even people say that's an insult or something. I don't think that is at all. I love a gritty playoff player. So I'm so excited for that tonight.
And this is an interesting matchup too defensively. you
Mhm.
know, of who's guarding Aja Wilson. It's going to be Natasha Mack. Now, Natasha Mack, not really a big scorer, not somebody they really like run stuff for, where they try to get
Yeah.
her a touch in the post or something. She gets a lot of stuff on putbacks and loose balls. Is not a big scorer, but she's out there for one reason: to concentrate on defense and to keep Aja Wilson off the glass, and make it tough for her. Now that's what now Aja Wilson is not somebody that's just right at the rim player. Like, she has a mid-range game. Sometimes she'll take some threes, and she's got the green light. And I mean, who else are you going to give the green light to? So you'll see a very high shot volume. And that's why it's so hard, like, for player props to go under on her points, because it seems like the over points, it doesn't hit every game, don't get me wrong, but it seems like it's so obvious because she's getting so much shot volume. Like, you will go to like the under 3 in like the first quarter, and she's already got like 8 shots, and
Mhm.
then you could say, okay, she's going to get 20 plus shots tonight easily. So Natasha Mack, though, tricky defender for Aja Wilson, so it won't be easy for her necessarily.
All right, we can start with the prop bets for tonight because that's a great segue there. Thank you. Wilson's right now over 24.5 at minus 152 odds, over 25.5 minus 125, over 26.5 minus 105, and then we finally got a plus at over 27.5. Where's your head out there?
I actually do have at
No.
this time no props on this game, and
Okay.
I'll explain why. I
Please.
treat this very similarly to the NBA playoffs, where you have longer series and matchups are all different. So game one and maybe even game two of a series, I don't do as much prop betting as I certainly would in the meat
Mhm.
of the sandwich in like games 3 through 6 and potentially even a 7, because you want to see what's going to transpire. Even though they played in the regular season multiple times, that doesn't mean it's going to necessarily play out the same way. So I'm a little gun shy on betting props so early in the series, just because there's different matchup dynamics, and you kind of want to you want to see a little bit how it's going to play out. It's very different from like what we've got going on in baseball playoffs when you're betting player props, especially pitcher props, because now you're seeing, if you're watching the baseball, and I know you were watching
Unfortunately, I
you were
am.
unfortunately glued into Sox Yankees last night, where Cam Schlittler became a Yankee legend. But like pitcher props, these guys have shorter leashes, so they're working their bullpens a little bit more. This isn't like, okay, like they did with the kid last night, where he's got it going and the bullpen is taxed, like, stay out there, like Aaron Boone said to Cam Schlittler last night. So that's something that you can attack from a prop standpoint. I think it's a little bit different in basketball, both the WNBA and the NBA, because what you're probably going to be doing in this, and you're not going to see a lot of movement in terms of the numbers, but you're playing a little bit of market here. Somebody has a bad game in game one. Was it an outlier, or was there something in the matchup that made that player have a bad game, where it was a bad shooting night, or weren't scoring, or were turning the ball over too much? So you look for patterns, I think, early in the season. So that's why I really don't jump in totally on the prop market in terms of basketball.
Yeah, and I'd add we're jumping from 3 games to 5 games to 7 games now, so they have more time, and they, even from a coaching standpoint, it probably feels like they have a little more wiggle room to try different things out in maybe this game one. So it might not
Yeah.
be.
Fatigue as you get later in the series, I
Mhm.
think, is going to be absolutely real. And you even saw that last year. What was the it was the Lynx, of course, and the Liberty, but you saw that fatigue as the series, I think, really wore on. What was the because it ended up being what, a 3-2 series with the Liberty winning in 5. But I want to say, Sarah, and maybe you'll help me with the memory here. I think it was game number 5, where it was an astonishingly low scoring game, and I think it was like it was 19-10 after the first quarter. It ended up being 67-62
Yeah,
in
I just looked that up.
overtime. Yeah, I was looking it up
God.
as well, in overtime, because I remember it being like really super low scoring, because all the other games in the series were in the high 150s, or basically for the most part in the 160s. All the games that were certainly competitive, or game one was like 95-93. So the scoring was easier to come by early in the series. And then as you got on, the fatigue started to wear in as you got to a longer series. And now, by the way, last year that was a 5-game series. This is a 7-gamer for the first time. So I think that's something that you're going to want to watch here. You're going to want to see, and I think the result you're going to see is you're going to see the scoring a little bit higher early in the series. And then as you get tighter, it's going to be more defensive just because of the fatigue. Because keep in mind too, they played a 44-game regular season, and they're playing more games. So even those that have played overseas and are in obvious basketball shape, that tends to grind you down a little bit when you're playing a longer season.
Yeah, 100%. So by what you said, am I smelling an over tonight, or where's your head at tonight?
You are. I did bet the over. Slightly better number than we have currently in the market, and also at Bet Rivers. But I still think that this is a playable number at 161 to the over. I think the energy is still there, and they have had some rest. By the way, the Merc had been off since Sunday. The Aces did finish up Tuesday. So it's not like, okay, where they're going that every other day schedule like they do in the playoffs, where they were starting this right away on Thursday. So they have had a little bit of extra rest. I think the over is in order tonight, and I would expect more overs early in the series. And then, like I was saying, when you get to like the middle, the meat of the sandwich, games 3, game 4, game 5, especially if this is like 2-2 at game 5. I always love to play the under in that situation in the NBA playoffs where it is tied and game 5 is the pivotal game that more than likely will decide the outcome of the series. I love playing those unders. I hope we get a situation like that here where it's 2-2 going into game 5, because I think you'll see a super low scoring game, but not tonight. And the market certainly agrees. Over 161 Mercury Aces for me.
That's your best bet of the day?
It is.
Anything else you were kind of considering or eyeing?
A little bit Mercury series, and that would certainly be where I would go. I was hoping that maybe, I didn't think it was going to be super high. I was hoping maybe this would be like $1.40 or $1.50. That was probably going to be a little bit too rich here, but we'll go. You know what? We'll go. Why not? We'll go ahead and do it. Let's say Mercury in the series. Now, keep in mind with these series prices, like it's just like the NBA or the NHL, where sometimes you trade out a little bit and lock in profit. You got the dog in game 1, and then all of a sudden they steal game 1 and they become a favorite. Then you can trade out a little bit, depending on obviously the amount that you're betting on these. So, series prices, I think, are very much a trader's market. And then, of course, if you do have preseason futures or early season futures on one of these teams, especially if you have the Mercury, you probably are buying off a little bit of aces here, at least on the series price, to at least lock in some profit. I think that's a good situation if you do have the Mercury.
I already technically, I guess, had the Mercury, not for the series, but to be the championship winner. So
yeah,
I won't count that as my bet of the day, but I did that too. So we're there on that one together. I think I'm going to take the over too. I like where your head's at with that. We're going to get to feel things. I'm not going to go crazy with the bets tonight because, like you said, it's like a feeling out process, but I feel comfortable with that one. And I'm excited to use this game as like data for, all right, where are the trends going? With the first 2 games, of course, it's kind of like, all right, where's the pushback and where's the call and answer type thing? What's Wilson going to do? Which her market is so inflated that it's like not even, I don't really bet on her because it's just like the value of it sometimes is really tough. But AT, sometimes the points, assists, rebounds with her, like that has done me well throughout these playoffs.
The officiating, of course, is going to be key here too. And that's one reason I like the over, because I do think maybe because there's been a lot of complaints about the contact. I know Nafisa Collier did mention that amongst other things, and her takedown of Kathy Engelberg, quite frankly. But other players have mentioned it too. In their exit interviews from around the league. They have the exit interviews, when you wrap up the season, give up your comments. I'm looking forward to next year and all that, and what their off-season plans are. And you've seen a lot of players mention that. So I think the officials are like, okay, this is going to be a physical series, but we have to call that. We have to call this contact. So that's another reason I do like the over, because I do think you're probably going to get, I know that's not the most aesthetically pleasing for viewers to watch. I think you're going to get a lot of fouls called tonight. I really do. And then when you get maybe some stars in foul trouble and they leave them in the game because they're in foul trouble, they have to be maybe not necessarily Matador Olay defense, but they have to be very cautious. And, there are times it's like, okay, I got to give up that basket. I can't pick up foul number 4, if I've got 3 near the end of the first half. So I think that's going to play out tonight with the officiating.
Yeah, you're right. And the situation has gotten out of hand, and players are speaking about it in ways that maybe we've never even seen in any sports league.
Hmm.
So, guess what? This stuff matters, and it really does affect the flow of the game, the happenings of the game. And I agree completely with you that there are going to be more fouls called, and that obviously impacts the way we're going to bet on this, and it impacts kind of the flow of the entire the thing.
Yeah, I agreed 100%. And I just think that they know now that there are more eyeballs because everybody
Yeah.
picked up Fee's statement there, and national media is talking about it. So they know that the eyeballs are out there. So the officials have got to be like, okay, we've got to start calling this. And we've had so many of these players get injured. Sometimes that's random. Sometimes it's because of the physical play.
Mhm.
And we've got to say that we're going to police that right away and get control of the game. And plus, the eyeballs on the officials, too. It's like, a lot of the general public and a lot of the fans believe that the officiating is incompetent in this league. So if you're going to show competence, you've got to call a lot of this stuff.
Yep, and it might be some things you deem in any other situation as a little soft or whatever, but they are exactly like you said. It's the public perception of it. It's kind of all eyes on them, especially before a potential lockout, the CBA negotiations. It's kind of the big stage for officials too, and they don't want to lose their jobs, right? So it's just like they do want to make sure they're being fair. There's a lot of talk about this in the NHL too, which I know like every year it's just kind of the refs are to some degree managing the game a little bit when it comes to making sure both sides are fair, which kind of makes it like a more
And
evenly thing.
And yeah, it materializes, I think, earlier too in the
Yes.
seasons or in the playoff series, because then once you get
Mhm.
like in the meat of the season, it's like college basketball where they have these points of emphasis where, okay, the freedom of movement. So you're holding the cutters to the basket and they're going to call that. And then you get into January, February, and in the conference play, and it's like, yeah, they forgot all about it.
Mhm. 100%. So game one, there will be fouls, and we are taking the over, and that makes sense to me. I'm hyped for this game. I'm so excited to hang out with you guys for the rest of the finals. It's been a blast, and it will continue to be a blast. Wes, thanks for your time. Everybody, like
Thanks,
and
Sarah.
subscribe if you, of course, like and subscribe if you like us and want to hear more of us. Thank you so much, folks, and have fun tonight.